Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Irish Illustrated Insider. This is the first of three this week. We'll get into more of that a little bit later. I'm Tim Priester with Tim O'Malley of Irish Illustrated. We're joined by John Bryce of Football Scoop and Irish Illustrated. And it is football week. It is Florida State week, game number 9 for the Fighting Irish. We met with Marcus Freeman, talked about a pretty good number of topics that we'll hit upon with questions or here in the first segment. But Florida State comes to town 1-8, and they are a really, really bad offensive football team. They're not bad defensively, but I think that you're starting to see the erosion of their defense a little bit because their offense just can't score, can't stay on the field, can't possess the football. They've got a real quarterback problem. Their offensive line, having watched a bunch of them on Sunday night, is in really bad shape. But we'll get plenty of time to talk about Florida State today and Thursday. Guys, why don't you jump in? Pick your topic from Marcus Freeman's conversation with us a little bit earlier.
I'll go first on Florida State. They're good enough where our insider at 24/7 doesn't want any Notre Dame answers on them because everybody has stopped reading the site and waits for next year. So that's how good Florida State's offense, defense, and special teams are. Even though the special teams is good, they don't want anything. It's over. If you guys got -4 in August for Notre Dame in this game, you're looking pretty good. You might want to do something with that -26 too.
Oh, it's 26.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, look, if Notre Dame scores 27, you got to feel like you have a great chance to cover at this rate of play. So, this is a bad Florida State football team. It's one that has not benefited from the transfer portal the way that the 2023 iteration benefited from it, and now it's frankly raised much more big picture questions for Mike Norvell at Florida State after he got a very, very lucrative contract extension earlier this year, just at the whisper that he might be on Alabama's short list after Nick Saban retired. And he was going to get a raise and an extension regardless, but his name just being tangentially linked to Alabama gave him many, many millions more, made that buyout a lot more expensive. But I do expect changes on the Florida State staff after this season, not at the head coaching spot, but it's been indicated to me very strongly that there will be significant changes to the Florida State coaching staff going into the offseason.
Well, like Notre Dame in 2016, you either get rid of the head coach or the head coach has to make some tough decisions with assistant coaches, and that's a natural offshoot. But this comes down to really, really bad quarterback play. DJ Uiagalelei has been hurt. He had hand surgery at the beginning of October. I'm not even really sure what his status is for this game. There was a possibility that he would miss the rest of the season. I'm not sure it really matters because he was a losing proposition for them when he was starting. They've brought in Brock Glenn, who's a redshirt freshman, who's bad. Luke Kromenhoek, who at 6'4", 208, has given him a running threat, but neither he nor Brock Glenn can throw the football with much accuracy. That's why when I saw one of our questions that we didn't choose here today, but they want a judgment on Mike Brown as Notre Dame's receivers coach. Riley Leonard spun his wheels there for a few weeks. That makes it difficult on the wide receiver core, and I think that's a similarity with Florida State. Ja'Kai Douglas can play. Hakeem Williams can play. Malik Benson, who came from Alabama, can play. But they don't have a trigger man. And to Notre Dame's benefit, Riley Leonard's come a long, long way and is playing good football. But I think when I look at a couple of the comments, I was writing down some of the comments of the Florida State podcasters that I was watching. They were against North Carolina. One of the phrases was they were pretending to compete, which I thought was an interesting one. Broken, of course, was used. A bunch of others that aren't. He's lost his team. That was what was, of course, said about Mike Norvell. So I don't know. I thought the defensive line played hard against North Carolina. I don't know how disciplined they are. I know that there's a lot of bad tackling angles being taken by the secondary and the linebacker core. I know that there have been Irish Illustrated subscribers that said, "Hey, I don't want to believe it, until I see it." And Marcus Freeman talked about there is a lot of talent on the Florida State team, and there's no doubt about that. But they are clueless when it comes to chemistry and cohesion and playing good football.
In Notre Dame's point of view, Tay Johnson is available this week. Number 2 corner behind Christian Gray. I think obviously The key there is he's the number 4 corner. Carson Hobbs is the number 3 corner, and they did not have a number 4 corner. So it's good that maybe a future safety starter in Tay Johnson, it would be, if not 2025, 2026, can work at corner. That means they like his versatility. For Tay Johnson to go from injured safety to backup corner on the depth chart means they like him as much as they like Max Hurlman, who they completely trust. So I think that's a good sign for Johnson. Priester, you mentioned on instant analysis, Logan Thomas questionable, so he might be out with a groin injury. That could allow someone like Tay Johnson to take Logan Thomas's very important part on special teams. Logan Thomas leads Notre Dame in special team snaps, so that's a lot. There's a lot of roles to fill there. It won't all be Tay Johnson.
He's very effective. To clarify, he did say, did he not say hamstring as opposed to groin?
Oh, yeah.
I think he said hamstring.
But, no, one person's going to take Logan Thomas's spot because he leads them in snaps. So
yeah, he's
Tay
really
Johnson,
good.
I bet, gets some time in there.
JB, what do you have?
Yeah, going back to DJ Ungalele, I don't think it matters if he plays or not. He was upside down in touchdowns to interceptions at the time of his injury. He hasn't played in the game, I don't believe, since the last weekend of September, the same day that Notre Dame was polishing off Louisville. So even if he was able to decide to return this week, we're talking about 7 weeks out of action, and that offense has more issues than just a quarterback. But we had noted before, early in the season, we noted on this podcast that DJU just simply wasn't capable of elevating the people around him. And I think that to Riley Leonard's credit, he started playing like a quarterback who's elevating the people around him. And so you have two teams going in completely polar opposite directions. And yes, it's a talented defensive front for Florida State specifically, but they've got a number of players out. Their most recent ACC injury report, I think they had 7 different regular contributors out for their most recent game against North Carolina. That's a North Carolina team that also is likely facing the specter of Mac Brown's retirement sooner rather than later, that has had a hard luck season and not a lot to play for. And North Carolina just embarrassed Florida State. So it's the lone night game of the year for Notre Dame. I think earlier it was anticipated going into the season that Stanford was going to be a night game, and then it got flexed back into that 3:30 slot because Stanford frankly wasn't good enough. They would probably change this game out of the primetime slot if they could, but they're going to keep Notre Dame in a primetime slot the week of the first CFP rankings for sure.
And Mitch Jeter, we didn't mention him. He's still listed as questionable. Tim, I thought you had.
He's the groin.
He's the groin. Yes,
he's the groin injury.
Yeah, he's the one with the groin injury, and I think you made a good point on instant analysis that as long as he's ready he doesn't necessarily have to be ready probably for this game or the next game, maybe the next 3. I ranked in order of difficulty in the order that they're being played. Florida State is the easiest. I would say Virginia next, Army because they're one-dimensional, unlike Navy. And then USC, we'll get to that. But I mean, USC they've lost 5 games by a total of 19 points. So before we say that they're awful and they've quit, like people are saying about Florida State, they don't know how to close. That's for sure. They're 4-5. But that's a very talented team too, and they haven't been that far off. But anyway, moving forward with some of the things that we discussed with Marcus Freeman, and I brought this up on instant analysis. I wanted to say some really positive things about Jalen Snead. He played hard, start to finish against Navy. Was named the defensive player of the game by the Notre Dame coaching staff. He had number 5 linebacker in a rotation of 5. And obviously was disgruntled a little bit earlier in the season, but he played hard. I give him a lot of credit. He could go both ways, in terms of his effort and attitude. He played really well against Navy, along with several other defensive players, including Riley Mills and Junior Tuialamaka.
And good for Jalen Snead. We saw Snead's family in the same corner of the end zone pregame, where he scored the touchdown. So that was a good moment for Snead, and well-deserved if he fought his way back. Who would have known the option whisperer would be Jalen Snead 3 years in a row, starting against Navy and having his best game in year 3. He's like Jack Kaiser and Greer Martini, only the fans are dying for him to play as opposed to the other way around.
All right, I want you guys to, since I don't know exactly the right wording or what to bring it up, tell everybody about CJ Carr and what Marcus Freeman said about CJ Carr.
I mean, he has elbow soreness and has not been throwing for a while. And if you're reading Irish Illustrated closely, you would see that he doesn't warm up, which I think was the first cause for concern, to not warm up at all. That's a straight up shutdown. But he does play scout team safety against Navy, so that's a good thing too, right? Wearing a red jersey. He's wearing a red jersey. Let's not think he's getting hurt. But as Mike Denbrock said, he can recognize a post route pretty well, and he can help out there. So CJ Carr does not need surgery. It was asked by Mike Berardino today. Good question, because CJ Carr is not on the 2 deep, so he is not part of the injury report. I don't know if they'd tell you he needed surgery if he did, but it's good news to hear that it was defiantly saying he does not need surgery. And if he were the starting quarterback, maybe they would have pushed him back a little faster.
Yeah, and it stems all the way back to the week of the Louisville game, a practice mishap, and he's been dinged up since that time with the elbow. We noticed in weeks leading up to today that CJ Carr initially was really a non-participant at the end of a Tuesday practice as we came in for interviews, and then he graduated to a little bit more of a participant in going through some snaps and some plays, but not throwing the football. And Marcus Freeman emphasizing today, no, he's not throwing the football. His phrase was, we're being 110% precautionary with this and moving him back along as slowly as possible. When that's the presumed future of your program at the quarterback position, you take all those precautions. But this has been going on now, pushing 7 weeks since the mishap, since the play occurred in practice leading into the Louisville game.
Yeah, let me add to that, put a finer point on it, John. When people hear elbow, is it sore elbow from throwing? It's our understanding was a hit that he took, a hit that he probably shouldn't have to take when you're CJ Carr, you're any of the quarterbacks really, going up against. It's certainly CJ Carr. So it's not elbow soreness from throwing that we're aware of. It was from a hit that he took. So they're being cautious. And Marcus Freeman said they want to, he needs to be 110%. Otherwise, they're going to be overly cautious. And he said he thought that they would be turning him loose and letting him throw pretty soon. So long term, there's nothing there to really freak out about. Although it doesn't, it involves CJ Carr. So freaking out could
Well, I mean, it changes
be a
absolutely
choice.
everything in the offseason. If he needs surgery, you can't let your quarterbacks go. And you might have to go to the portal.
No,
Like-
no doubt about it. But I don't think we ever. I don't think we ever anticipated that he might need surgery on this. So, it's just being overly cautious. Guys, what else you want to, we do have the college football. Well, let's finish up. Anything else from the press conference? I don't think, there was discussion about the freshmen that haven't played. There are now 4 regular season games left. That makes it fair game for them to play in all 4 now when we always said and a bowl game. That means throughout the postseason, right? All of those are fair game, right?
Yep.
I'm glad you brought that up, TP, because I was getting ready to bring up that point on my own. I think TO and I discussed it on one of our summer Irish Illustrated Insiders on YouTube, but that is 100% correct. You get their 4 regular season games and as many postseason games. If you're on a CFP team, you get to play all of those games if the coaches decide to play you. So freshmen for Notre Dame who play 4 games, if the Irish advance to the playoffs and keep winning, they could play, I guess, an additional 4 games depending on what kind of playoff run the Irish would have.
Well, of course, on Tuesday, we will get the first college football playoff ranking by the committee. Notre Dame checks in at number 10 in the Associated Press poll for whatever that is worth. They dropped 2 spots. I understand dropping behind Indiana. We can say Indiana hasn't played anybody. They haven't beaten anybody, but they also haven't lost in Northern Illinois. So I have no problem with Indiana being ranked ahead of Notre Dame. I don't understand why BYU on a bye week moved ahead of Notre Dame. To me, that sounds like the voters like trying to make a correction from the previous week when Notre Dame jumped from number 12 to number 8. So they're number 10. I think they deserve to be number 9 just because of the BYU jumping them when they were both on a bye. We got questions on that, but I just did want to bring that up because Texas A&M, Iowa State, Clemson, and Navy all lost this weekend. I'm sure we all had a little bit more opportunity to watch some college games this past weekend. Guys, what do you think about, well, Texas A&M, they got outscored 24-0 in the second half. Iowa State is part of a Big 12 conference that made me say out loud multiple times, the Big 12 sucks, while watching them play. And then they finally did lose the game. And Clemson, Dabo Swinney is, he not only does he not believe in taking transfers, he also doesn't believe in analytics, apparently, either.
He maybe the worst. This is even analytics. This is math. Maybe it didn't matter because they weren't good enough to keep it close at the end. But I mean,
Right.
there's 6 minutes left and you're down 13,
13.
and you kick a point to go down 12. There's
So
two
now you
ways to
need
come back.
Now you need 2 touchdowns.
Yeah, as opposed to a touchdown, a field goal, and a 2-point conversion. I mean, that was insane. That is just not paying any attention whatsoever. He needs a guy standing next to him to tell him what to do the entire game, because that was ridiculous. Fortunately, it didn't matter for him because they just got blown out at that point. But
And that was good for Notre Dame, with Louisville playing as well as they did. I saw the interview with him afterwards, and he just he disavowed any knowledge of what he should. He had
of that play.
No issue with kicking the extra point at all.
Well, yeah, because he got beat down afterwards. Didn't matter at all.
That's for me, that's the second time this year. Clemson opened the season, and Dabo Swinney post game just said we got our butts beat, beat off or whatever. Like, we just got our butts beat. That was his phrase when they lost 34-3 or whatever it was to Georgia. Now this game, he comes out and says we got our butts flat out coached, and good on Dabo somewhat owning up to things. But the narrative going into that game was how Dabo had been stubborn and done it his way, and that Clemson was in position for the playoffs. And now Clemson is a zero margin for error team to try and still make the playoffs. And basically their only path at this point would be winning the ACC championship to get there. And they're not in control of their destiny anymore because Miami and SMU are ahead of them. And in almost every single Clemson broadcast this year that I've watched, we've seen the graphic saying, one of only 4 teams at the FBS level to not have a starter from the transfer portal on either side of the ball. Well, the other 3 are the service academies, which makes complete sense. But when you're Dabo Swinney and you're being this obstinate, how long does that do you live on your past successes? This just isn't Clemson of 5 years ago. And yes, they pantsed Notre Dame the last time these two teams played, almost exactly a year ago.
That's on Notre Dame.
Yeah, but this is where Clemson is. And when you see a Vanderbilt thriving with some select pieces from the transfer portal, you see Notre Dame using it very adeptly, not living off of it by any means. Their core is their core, and they recruited those guys and have developed them and continue to develop them. But I just think Clemson, I think that loss brings back in all of the big picture questions for Clemson, and it's not going to change overnight.
Go ahead, Tim.
I mean, I think how, and JB's right, Notre Dame's core is not the transfer portal. But if Notre Dame pulled a Dabo Swinney, Freeman would have had 5 losses last year. He wouldn't have had Javante Jean-Baptiste or Thomas Harper or Sam Hartman. He wouldn't have Riley Leonard this year, who's behind Jeremiah Love as the team MVP now at this point. He wouldn't have Jordan Clark. I mean, you have to be involved in it. You absolutely have to be involved in it. And maybe Dabo can do Notre Dame light. But what if Dabo would have picked up Javante Jean-Baptiste, Thomas Harper last year, and he would have gotten a hold of some other? I mean, what if not RJ Oben, but what if he would have gotten Jordan Clark this year? And what if he got Riley Leonard?
Yeah, no doubt. Obstinate's the right word, JB. I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to go too extensive into Clemson, but Navy, Navy's loss, that's a bad loss. It was on the road, but they never really competed to a level to win that game. So that
I heard someone mention the delay. Rice had a
long
delay.
Yeah,
Rice had a delay too, though.
Yeah,
exactly. Multiple of those Houston
Texas
games were delayed Saturday. Houston area games were delayed, but we can't lose sight of the fact that that's a Rice team that had just fired its head coach, Mike Bloomgren, in his 7th year or so. But also, I will note that's a Rice team that was they fired him because they so vastly underachieved this year, because Rice had among the most returning starters of any program in the country this year. They had about 19 returning starters to begin this season and have made it to the postseason a year ago. So within their own realm of existence, Rice, one of the most underachieving teams in college football this year. I will say Louisville's win at Clemson is a bigger deal for Notre Dame's strength of schedule than Navy's loss to Rice.
I would agree with you there. Wrapping up here real quickly, I don't know when it was, last week or the week before, when I said I hinted that there was a top 7 team that could be added to Notre Dame's schedule. I think some interpreted, or maybe I didn't say it the right way, that I was talking about the 2025 schedule. I was not. I was talking about the end of the decade, and we found out today, or Bobby Burton, who is the one that put it out on Twitter or X, Notre Dame will be playing Texas in 2028 and 2029. I don't know if we have any more details than that, but I don't know that any more are necessary at this point because that's so far down the road. But
BK will be sipping Mai Tais on the beach, Tim, if that happens.
That's the odds are great that he will be. We thought it might be a little bit earlier than that, but odds it will be. Texas, it looks pretty daunting. It's a daunting team to add to your schedule as we sit here in 2024, but I'm sure Texas is looking at it in a similar way as well. Looking to upgrade your wardrobe, founded by Notre Dame alum Go Wang, you've seen ESQ's custom clothing on the player walk and all of your favorite players and coaches. With more than a decade of making the best bespoke clothing available, ESQ will help you look and feel your best. From a perfect fitting suit or sport coat, shirt or bomber jacket, or that perfect tuxedo for wedding season, check out esqclothing.com and book an appointment to upgrade your wardrobe today. Mention Irish Illustrated and get 10% off your entire purchase. That's esqclothing.com. Segment 2 coming up, burning up the boards.
If you're coming to a game this season, you have to check out Game Day Your Way, Notre Dame's tailgate service provider. Game Day offers everything you need, including tailgate gear, catering, and even beverage delivery right to your spot. And their Irish Express transportation from Chicago allows you to tailgate while you travel to their all-inclusive party zone in South Bend. Let Game Day deal with all the hassle so you can focus on the fun. For tailgates, tickets, transportation, and more, visit GameDayYourWay.com.
Segment 2, burning up the boards. We start with a question from Statman72. Can you recall a Notre Dame opponent who was as highly ranked in the preseason and fell as far before playing Notre Dame as FSU has done this season? And 2012 is the one that comes to mind with Michigan State, but they ended up being a 500 team. We're talking about a 1-8 team. Tim, you got a little bit of research on this?
I went and took a look, and you're right about 2012, but it was actually USC was number 1. And they finished 7-6.
Oh,
preseason number 1, finished 7-6. There's no Notre Dame opponent on here, but Notre Dame is on here a few times. You want to talk about that way? 1981, number 3 Notre Dame finishes 5-6. 2016, number 10 Notre Dame finishes 4-8.
Yeah.
1994, number 2 Notre Dame finishes 6-5-1. And then of course this USC team though is way worse. They're 1-8. They're going to go 1-9. They're going to finish. Let's say they finish 2-10, just to be.
You mean Florida State?
Florida State, 2-10. Their over under for wins this year was 9. Now 60% of the bets were on the under, so people were onto that. But 9-2 is bigger than you're ever going to get. I can't imagine there's ever been anything worse. They're the number 10 team in the country AP poll, and they're going to finish 2 or with 1 or 2 wins. That's incredible. Florida. In 2013, finished 4-8, but that's still not 2-9 or 2-10. It's still not. It's still you still can't get there. Arkansas, 2012, 4-8. 4 is different.
They do play. They play Charleston Southern. Is that who it is? I think it's Charleston Southern.
I'm giving them that win.
Yeah, right. So, assumably, it's going to be really interesting to see their level of intensity at Notre Dame Stadium at night.
For Charleston Southern, I'm like, I'm not going to follow that game at all.
No.
That's why TP. I was just going to say that's why TP. I just disagree ever so slightly on your sequencing of Notre Dame's degree of difficulty in its final 4 games, because Army kids are never going to quit. So Army to me is hands down the most difficult game left. I really believe this USC program is teetering. We've already seen a couple of players decide to sit out the rest of the year. Now that's another loss. They have literally absolutely 0 to play for. They have a number of NFL prospects maybe they don't officially declare themselves out for the rest of the year. I can't imagine USC's injury report to the Big Ten, or excuse me, player availability report to the Big Ten doesn't grow in the coming weeks. And to wrap a bow on the USC Trojans talk, look, their last 24 games, I've written on this on Football Scoop, I've talked about it on the podcast. Their last 24 games, guys, they're 12-12. That's no longer an aberration. That's no longer a one-off. That's 2 complete seasons. Now it stretches from the end of Lincoln Riley's first year there to where they are now, but 24 games at 12-12. Bill Parcells said it best. You are what your record says you is. That's a 500 program.
Where would you place USC then on the degree of difficulty among the 4 remaining opponents? They would be the
They'd be second. They'd be second
okay.
based off
All right,
sheer
fair enough.
talent.
Yeah,
But I
fair
just
enough.
think Army, yeah, they might be one-dimensional, and it's worth noticing or monitoring the status of their great quarterback, Bryson Daly, because he did not play this weekend.
Did they ever disclose it, JB? What the issue was?
No, it was an injury.
Yeah.
Held out for injury, but no, they did not disclose. They will not disclose more details than are bare minimum necessary. So that's one to continue watching moving forward this week. And Army's got a tough game coming up against North Texas.
Question from Insane Andy Tucson. Jordan Faison should be a difference maker for the offense down the stretch. Realistically, what kind of stats could we expect, and could he supplant Bo Collins as receiver number 1 for the balance of the year?
I maintain Mitchell Evans is going to be 1. I think Faison will be the number 2 most targeted and successful. And then I think Riley Leonard does have a kinship with Bo Collins that will keep him there. But in terms of stats, I don't think you're going to get anybody's. We're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of a 100-yard receiver for Notre Dame. It was senior day, Wake Forest, Rico Flores Jr., which was a 2-year anniversary of the last time Notre Dame had a 100-yard receiver, which was Lorenzo Styles in a bowl game. So and Chris Tyree in a bowl game. So there we go. A lot of guys transfer after they get 100 yards. Let's hope no one gets it this year. Keep it at 99.
What do you think about the? I mean, I think all those guys are those are clearly the top 3 target wise. And ultimately, JB, it ends up being where Riley Leonard decides to throw the football.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Notre Dame does not have one dominant alpha wide receiver that teams come into a game and say, we're taking that guy away from us from the game plan no matter what, and then we'll live with the consequences. But for better or worse, Notre Dame has a bunch of very solid options, and we've seen it can be a different guy on any given day. Jaden Greathouse, I think, has popped up a little bit more here in the last month or so of the season. I think that's significant. Look, Faison is a guy that can completely take the top off if he's healthy. And I meant to make this point on instant analysis after Marcus's press conference. He's another guy I believe plays a lot bigger than he is. He plays with a tenacity and a physicality that you wish some of those other guys would play with as well. So I think Notre Dame is overall in a good spot with its pass catchers. It's really hard to predict because outside of maybe Riley Leonard favoring Bo Collins just a little bit more, there hasn't been one guy that just every week has emerged as, okay, that's clearly the top target. Go ahead, Tio.
I think I don't, and I agree Faison can take the top off because he showed in the Sun Bowl. I think Faison's greatest addition to this will be his run after the catch and maybe the little jets that they get him. He's the one guy I like throwing the slants where he comes back into the defense, the tunnel screens, the rocket screens. I think he can really make a difference there. But yeah, his speed. You remember last year we heard when he first kind of showed up, it must have been after Louisville, that he timed out as the fastest, now ever means 2018, but as the fastest receiver ever at Notre Dame in 2018 on GPS. Whether that's true or not, he's in the conversation with Braden Lenzy as a guy running GPS speed. So I'd like to see that. I'd like to see him take the top off of defense, but really, boy, you see when he takes that second step, he's full speed. There's not everybody's full speed on their second step.
I think it's a good point on the yak yards for him. And some really great things by Marcus Freeman, some of the things he said about Faison Day that, he does exactly what you ask him to do, which, any coach is going to love that. Tio, you know that. The way he runs routes, the way he blocks, even when he knows he's not necessarily the primary receiver or he's not going to get the ball, the way he goes about his business in games when he's healthy, which he is now. And then also, in practice as well. So as a coach, you love that kind of stuff. And former walk-on or not, Jordan Faison is a big-time player for Notre Dame.
Two questions together. Let's start with the first one. Welch Bryan, 11-12. Where do you guys predict Notre Dame will be in the first set of playoff rankings? Do you think A&M's and Navy's loss hurts Notre Dame more than Louisville's win over Clemson helps? Would that be the reason for a 2-spot demotion in the AP poll? I think we covered the AP poll part. Where do you guys see Notre Dame being ranked?
Go ahead, John.
I see them right around probably that 9 to 11 range. Personally, I still believe that the Louisville win is more valuable for Notre Dame over the course of the weekend than either the A&M loss or the Navy loss. Navy was not going to be a CFP factor once Notre Dame annihilated the midshipmen last week, and I don't think Navy's probably done losing this year. And Texas A&M, look, that's not a bad loss. Yeah, South Carolina won that game pretty deceptively with a 44-20 margin, but it was 20-20 in the third quarter, and then South Carolina scored 10 straight points. Texas A&M still had multiple opportunities to respond, and then look, it exposed A&M for having a very, very small margin for error in year one under Mike Elko, who's done a really fabulous job. So I don't think that loss is really crippling to the Irish. I think, like, depending on how they evaluate everything, Notre Dame's got what, 3 wins this year against ranked opponents now. A&M, Louisville, and Navy all ranked at the time that Notre Dame defeated them. The loss to NIU, you wish NIU was 6-2 right now instead of being a pretty middling team. But we said going into that game that was a talented but not overly dangerous NIU team that was not particularly super well coached, and we've seen that bear itself out over the course of the season.
Yeah. Tim, did you read the second question there from True Sophomore?
I did not yet.
You
No.
did, yeah. I want to throw that in before I comment. True Sophomore, we paired it up with that. If you were on the committee, where would you have Notre Dame ranked Tuesday night? Again, I said I don't understand why BYU jumped Notre Dame when they were both idle. But I personally would have Notre Dame 9th or 10th. I think Indiana deserves to be ahead of them. You can say that, I don't know if I said this live or just us talking about it. You can say that, Indiana hasn't beaten anybody. Yeah, well, they also haven't lost to Northern Illinois. They could have lost to any one of those teams that you say they, shouldn't or wasn't very good. So I think Indiana, Indiana passes the eye test, man. I mean, Kurt Cignetti has done a tremendous job there, and so I think they deserve to be there. So I'm thinking 9 or 10. What are you guys thinking?
Real quickly on BYU, I've been thinking about this. I should have made this point. I'll tell you why I think the Cougars jumped up even without playing, and it's because SMU absolutely beat the hell out of Pitt over the weekend, and BYU's best win of the year is going to SMU and winning on a Friday night, on a short week, on the road. Now SMU controls its destiny to be in the ACC championship game and have a great shot to be a playoff team. Honestly, if SMU advances to the ACC championship game and as a one-loss team and loses to an undefeated Miami, that might give the ACC 2 teams in the college football playoff, which probably would further enhance some of the nerves for Notre Dame, depending on how other games break going down the stretch. But that's why I believe BYU jumped up this week. I got to visit with some BYU coaches this past week during the bye week. Interesting to see what they're doing out there and just the physicality that they play with. I would have Notre Dame seated, like I said, but between 9 and 11. That's where I expect them to be. That's where I have them. I'll tell you what I think will happen that I think is trash if it does. If Penn State is ranked above Notre Dame in the CFP, I think that's just abysmal. I think that's people not really paying attention, because while this Penn State team is an elite defensive team, it overall is just what I call a nice college football team. They're not dynamic. They don't scare you. They didn't score a touchdown at home in an everything matters football contest where they needed it so desperately to get over the hump.
T.O.,
my rankings are a little different. I have Oregon 1 because the 12 men on the field trick was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life. It was much better than Notre Dame's 10 men on the field trick they tried against Ryan Day the year before. Number 2 would be Georgia, because I don't know how good Texas is, but I know one thing about Georgia. They looked awfully good while they were beating the living daylights out of Texas at Texas. So Georgia's my 2. Ohio State's 3, because they might not be 100% dangerous right now, but I really wish Penn State would have beaten them, because I'd be more than happy for anybody to face that junk Penn State team as opposed to Ohio State, and Ohio State is getting back at it. My 4 through 10, or my 4 through 9, or any order you want: Texas, Miami, Tennessee, Indiana, Notre Dame, BYU. And I would like to be the czar of college football and have IU play BYU this week. I'd like to have Notre Dame play Miami in South Bend this week instead of Florida State. Tennessee and Texas, they already have enough on their plates to deal with coming up in November. They don't need to play each other because they have the trials of Job coming. And I'd like to see Penn State go ahead and play Minnesota to get them out of the thing right now because I never want to watch them play again. I had one Saturday off since December 3rd last year, Tim Priester, to watch college football, and I tuned into Penn State. It's my fault. I still blame them more. And I hope Minnesota and Quinn Carroll beat them 4-2 because that's about what that game deserves.
So you spared yourself of watching Iowa State?
I did. I was able to do that. Yeah.
JB, I want to good on you. You're right. BYU beat SMU. SMU is a good football team, and that is enough to place them ahead of Notre Dame. Fair enough. Now, why it wasn't done
Right.
the week before, I don't
But
quite
that's
understand.
not a real
that.
ranking
Well, I
anyway.
think
That's
it's
that's
because
just writers. So
I think it's also because SMU hosted an undefeated Pitt team that was also one of the
Good.
biggest surprises.
Again, another point.
And that was never,
you just
never
proved me
a
wrong
game.
once again. I agree with you. So my question is,
I need to change one thing, Tim. I don't want Penn State to play Minnesota. I want them to host Ole Miss or Alabama so people can watch them get absolutely boat raced at home with that awful offense, coaching staff.
You wanted Ohio State with a second loss because I mean, at the end of the day, when it comes to crunch time, playoff time, that is an extremely talented football program. So you don't want to face that. My question to you, John, is if Notre Dame's 11th, who moves ahead of them at number 10?
You know, I think it depends. I wouldn't personally myself have Notre Dame 11th. That's just where I think that they may land. One more note on Penn State that I really want to drive home here. Made the same point on the Football Scoop podcast today. And Minnesota got a nice win on the road against Illinois over the weekend. They're a fringe top 25 team. They're not real close right now. If Minnesota isn't ranked when Penn State goes there at the end of the year, Penn State's going to be sitting 11-1 without a single win against any ranked team. And now it's not Penn State's fault that USC has fallen off the edge of the into the Pacific Ocean out there or anything. But Penn State has dramatically benefited from a light schedule, and their only one true showcase opportunity was Ohio State. They could not showcase themselves in that contest. And one other point, and in terms of where Notre Dame's going to be tomorrow night, and again, I think it'll be in that 9-11 range. Let's not lose sight of the fact that Tennessee and Georgia play in 2 weeks in Athens. That's going to be a second loss for somebody. That second loss will be Tennessee. And then you still have a couple of more of those teams. You have Indiana and Ohio State meeting in a couple of weeks as well.
Texas is Texas A&M coming up. That's
Indiana has Michigan
still got Texas
and
A&M. They've got a Florida team that especially if Florida had kept DJ Lagway healthy, or if he'd been able to stay healthy, was looking very improved. But yeah, there's a lot more meat left on the schedules of a number of teams in front of Notre Dame. That's why you want Notre Dame, and Notre Dame definitively should be within that top 12 tomorrow night. But you want Notre Dame to keep handling its business because there's some teams in front of them that have to lose.
I'd be mad if they're 11.
Yeah,
that would not
I would too.
That would not be right.
I think it's 9 or 10.
Yeah,
I would put them 9th.
I would too. You know what? I want to give, since I've ragged on Penn State now for 10 minutes, I do want to give Penn State a little credit for that comeback win at USC, because USC was not totally broken yet. That's Penn State's best win, to go win at USC when they were not. I mean, USC was fighting. That was a good win, good solid everyday win by Penn State. And now I want to see them lose to Minnesota.
Yeah, I would say maybe an SMU. Will the committee value SMU in a power conference with one loss, and just that one loss being to undefeated BYU? Will the committee put that team ahead of Notre Dame? That's a scenario where I could see Notre Dame as 11 because maybe SMU is 10 as being an undefeated team in conference play in the ACC and only having one, I think, 3-point loss to an undefeated BYU.
Question from Philip B1210. Who's been the most underrated offensive player and most underrated defensive player for Notre Dame thus far?
Cross and Mills. Marcus Freeman ruined my answer today. But Cross and Mills are the most underrated players. They're two of the 10 best players on the team again. Howard Cross is higher than that. Mills is going to keep playing that way. Notre Dame fans don't appreciate them enough, and they will notice their absence next year in Hard Rock Stadium. No, in September because it's going to be tough. So Cross and Mills. I mean, who do we have underrated
I
other
think
than I mean,
think
other than Riley Leonard being
I
wildly
think a guy that
underrated,
was
but
underrated last year.
Coogan.
Yes.
Okay, yeah. I thought we gave him his props recently, but you're right. Coogan's a good call because there has not been the drop off we thought might happen for a first time starting center. It's not like he got inserted at guard. He got inserted at a new position.
No, they're averaging 235 yards rushing a game since Purdue. Anyway, I mean that's just a number, but I think that he's been very underrated. John?
I would have to. I think I would probably go with Anthony Knapp because there's probably not enough consideration given to a true freshman left tackle guy who's undersized at that, who opened the season helping Notre Dame get a landmark win that is so desperately needed as a program, and did it against a defensive line with 3, if not 4 NFL players on it. We have seen Anthony Knapp have a couple of growing pain moments, but we haven't seen him cost Notre Dame a game, or I don't even recall he necessarily cost Notre Dame a specific turnover. He's given up a few pressures and a couple of sacks here and there, but I would probably lean towards Anthony Knapp. What he's doing starting on that offensive line for this team with the expectations that Notre Dame has, I think is pretty damn impressive. So that's my offensive player. Defensively, I probably drift between Drake Bowen and Leonard Moore, just because we talk a lot about them, and we especially bragged on Drake after his 9 tackle performance. But there were a lot of questions going into the season about if he would take that next step. I was pretty bullish on him coming out of camp, but I think that he and Leonard Moore, for what they're doing to help this defense as injuries have mounted disproportionately in season on the defensive side of the ball, that would be my answer there.
I would. He was injured, so you can't really say Cooper Flanagan, but I would bet that if Cooper Flanagan had played all 8 games, he would still be underrated for all the dirty work stuff that he does at tight end. He'd have a few more receptions, which might remove him from that category. But Cooper Flanagan's is a real key for Notre Dame on offense, especially at the tight end position. Riley Mills, although again, I think it was a pretty slow start for him, but I can't
But
say
I still think he
Cross.
did. I still think he just didn't do what we thought he would do. I mean,
No.
it's
Tua Alamaka is another one, although we've been talking a lot about him lately.
that's the issue with underrated, Tim, is we talk about all 90 players all year long,
Yeah,
all
I
the
know.
time. Like
Yeah, I
I
know.
almost am overrating Leonard Moore. I call him better than Benjamin Morrison already. Like I can't stop. He's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I just think we don't appreciate. I think if you had got an opposing coaching staff to look at Notre Dame's team, they'd be like, well, it all starts at defensive tackle. And then fans would be like, oh, okay. It all starts at
And
defensive tackle.
he's been saying that for several weeks now. And
Yeah,
he's right. He's absolutely right. Question from Jay Bolt 250. With another bye week down and some more time to watch the rest of the nation, do you see anybody remotely close to the teams that knocked Notre Dame out of the playoffs in previous years? Of course, Clemson, Alabama, previous years. I'm obviously biased, but I don't see a single team. I definitely say blows Notre Dame out. And then in parentheses, he adds Oregon would be the closest.
I think it depends
I don't think Oregon.
on the setting of the game. And I think it depends on the initial start to the game. I think Georgia, look, if Georgia could go do that to Texas, then Georgia could manhandle Notre Dame under the right circumstances. We've talked before. We still don't know anything about this Notre Dame team, how it would or will respond if it ever gets down 10 points in a game this year. Now, all the credit in the world to Notre Dame for having not been down 10 points in a game this year and for controlling a lot of the adversity that it has faced. But no, I said this morning, I don't think there's a super elite team this year in college football, but I still think there's a significant difference in some defensive lines, like that Georgia defensive line going against Notre Dame's offensive line. I still think Texas and Ohio State have speed to burn at some offensive positions that would give me pause. Oregon, schematically, maybe they don't scare you tremendously. I just love how sound they are in all components. And Dylan Gabriel makes a lot of really good decisions. He's not as an athlete as Riley Leonard. He's not as big, but the guy has won a hell of a lot of football games now at a third different school.
I think Oregon would beat Notre Dame if I had to bet, but Georgia's the team I think Notre Dame had the biggest problem with, because I don't think Notre Dame's blossoming offensive line would do well against Georgia's defensive line.
Yeah,
I think it ruins a lot of things.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Now Carson Beck's been kind of a turnover machine through the air, and so playing
Yeah,
against Notre
that
Dame
gives you hope. No, but this question's great because there is no he asked about the
right
teams that
to
knocked out
answer
Notre Dame.
to answer
Yeah,
the question
not even
compared
close
to
to
the
that.
yeah Clemson and
Clemson and Alabama
2018 and
twice.
Alabama. Yeah,
That's not even. They're not even the realm of.
no,
That's not even close. Or
uh,
the best Georgia teams, or LSU of 19, which is better than all these teams.
right.
Like those teams are phenomenal teams.
Which makes the upcoming 12-team playoff a little bit more fascinating because you don't necessarily have that superior dominant team.
From Denver Maximus, the offense, especially the passing game, was beginning to click before the bye. Do you see any setback coming out of the bye week? Can Freeman keep this team mentally focused down the backstretch?
I think he can, and I don't see a setback. They look. We're thinking, man, we haven't seen Notre Dame for a while. They have been practicing. It's not like they left the practice field and now they're just picking it back up this week. I don't know exactly what their time off was this past weekend, but they didn't just let. Do you know? Do you guys actually know what?
I mean, other than he announced that it would be the veterans were getting a lot of time off last
Yeah,
week.
but as it should.
I think they practiced
not,
through Thursday. Oh, sorry. I
Yeah,
was just going to say, I think they
right.
practiced through Thursday, had the weekend off, and were due to report
Right.
back Sunday
which is
night.
what they did a few weeks ago. So
Right.
yeah, that's all good. I'm not concerned about that. I think they're locked in. I think he's pounded home the pain of Northern Illinois. I don't think that's going to be an issue. They should be, fairly well rested now. They've had 2 weeks off in the last 5. So I think they go into November in a really good frame of mind. They know what's out there in front of them. There's speculation, will Notre Dame be bypassed if they're 11-1? They're not thinking in those terms. They're thinking that if they go through November and win the last 4 games, that they'll be in a playoff. So I don't think that that's an issue moving forward.
No, I don't think so. I think you should hope to see growth from them. And I asked Marcus Freeman about what the offensive identity would be and how they accentuate it moving forward in today's press conference. And he talked about some of those elements, some things that he thinks they've established they can do well, that they need to continue to build on, and indicated, it's a little bit more than not just having Riley Leonard and Jeremiah Love able to run the football well, but they all have to be able to run the football well for them to do what they want to do. But this is a chance for this team to have rested up some, but also continue to build, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They seem to be settling in again to a different starting 5 on the offensive line, and they've had 2 weeks coming out of Navy to work together and get prepared for this Florida State team.
From Martin Evenflow, if you could magically heal one of these injured players for the final 4 games and hopefully the playoffs, who would it be? Botello, Traore, or Morrison? I assume you guys aren't picking someone else.
No, well, for me, it'd be Traore. Because just a pure pass rusher. As great as Benjamin Morrison is, they've been able to stem the tide with Leonard Moore. You'd love to have both of them back, but if you had me choose between those two, Botello would be third on my list. I'd definitely say Bubakar Traore.
Yeah, I think it's Traore. Look, Botello was playing really well, and his experience, I think, would be a factor, an asset going into the CFP. But Traore, we've just seen the guy has a chance to impact any given play, and any given play that he makes his biggest impact, he's impacting the game.
I mean, if this is even an easier Traore answer, if he never got injured and got to keep developing this whole time.
Yeah, think about what we would have seen up to this point.
Because I can't figure out, I mean, Morrison's obviously would start, but let's say be Morrison and Moore even. It's not like Morrison would then take over at nickel and you'd have to beat a team that throws so well that he's your new guy, because I don't think that's how it would go. So even in this mythical world where we're trying to fit people into spots, I think Benjamin Morrison would just be another really a starting corner at Notre Dame. Traore would change something more. Now, if Morrison was an accomplished nickel, and you start talking about the playoffs and you're going against Oregon and Ohio State, and all of a sudden you got shut down everywhere and Jordan Clark's your dime backer or something crazy like that, then you could start finagling. But Traore is the guy.
Yeah. We jump into men's basketball, which opens Wednesday, this Wednesday against Stonehill. Looking forward to seeing them play after their exhibition victory last weekend. A question from M. Garcia 12. As men's basketball kicks off this week, what are 3 bold predictions you have for the 2024-25 season?
Go ahead, JB.
My first one will be that I fully expect at the end of February, 1st of March, as we're wrapping up the regular season, going into conference tournament play, that we are discussing Notre Dame as a potential at-large NCAA tournament team. I think that Notre Dame will be improved enough to be in that bubble discussion, to have a chance to win some more games at home in league play that can keep them in that discussion. So that would be first and foremost for me, my number one. Number two is probably Braden Shrewsbury, I think, may end up leading the ACC in three-point shooting this year. And I know I'm that he did a lot of good things last year when he was hot. He was really hot. But his body has been redefined. He looks much more athletic. He's still got a little bit of a slow release, but they're running some really neat things offensively to get him good looks and get him looks in spots of the floor that he really likes. He was super impressive last week in that win that I covered at Purdue Fort Wayne, and I think it's worth noting that's a team that's picked to win, or picked as the co-champion in its conference, the Horizon League, I believe. So that wasn't just a slap team that Notre Dame went and absolutely handed it to on its own home floor last week. So those would be my first two. My third one would be, I boldly predict, I hope Keba Jai and Julian Roper spend more time on the court together than they did last week, because those two guys fouled out both in a combined 16 minutes. So my last one's a little bit of levity there.
I hope they don't,
Julian
actually.
Roper and especially Kevin I have got to stay on the floor more than a combined 16 minutes and 10 fouls.
I hear what you're saying, Tio. I hear what you're saying. I mean, I think Julian Roper's playing time will diminish from last season. I want you to make your predictions first.
I think Notre Dame will also be in the bubble conversation. I picked them 8th. That would put them probably in the bubble conversation. I also think Notre Dame is going to have a very good home record this year, as opposed to last year where it was come one, come all in November and December. Let's go hand Notre Dame a 20-point loss when you're named the Citadel. Let's beat them when you're Western Carolina. I think Notre Dame will, including against the ACC, I don't know. It's hard to say how many losses you have in that situation.
Yeah, when you guys say bubble team, what give me a conference record. So that's 11-9.
Yeah, it's 11-9 for me. But I think first 4 out type situation.
Yeah.
And you're going into that stretch. A -1 is, I think, Marcus Burton. Even though I picked him I had to rank them. I ranked them 6th. You have to rank for your top 15 players. So it makes it first team, second team, third team. I was the Notre Dame jerk that ranked him 6th. I'm sorry. I actually think, shouldn't say no fault of his own, but I'm giving them the Herringody treatment here. He has to improve his 3-point shooting. So I think he's going to shoot too many. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Marcus Burton's pull-up jump shot might be good, but Marcus Burton's pull-up jump shot is phenomenal. And it goes back to the favorite era of watching basketball in the 80s. And I think he wants to heighten his NBA prospects, professional prospects. And I think he'll miss more threes than he should shoot. How's that?
I think that's a good way of putting it.
And I also predict I will not lose the first 7 straight games I attend. Notre Dame will not lose the first 7 straight games I attend like they did last year.
Well,
Notre Dame was 0-7 until I took on I believe it was the Louisville game.
Well, I think Braden Shrewsbury is going to be a star. I think he'll be an all-league selection.
Wow.
So top 15.
Okay.
This year?
Oh, wow.
Yes, I do.
Holy smoke. That's a hell of
It is a bold prediction.
No, I do.
That's bold, baby.
I think he believes that. And that's part of the reason why I'm saying that first and foremost. He believes that. Now I know that's a bit
there
of
are a lot of
stretch,
players in this league. Man.
I know there are, but he is going to be so deadly from 3-point range. Let's face it. If he starts off the season shooting threes the way he did the last 3 quarters of it, that's not a stretch. And I think he's perfectly capable of that and the change of the body is significant as well. I just want to step out with that one. I say at least 10-10. I'm not sure that I'm ready to say 11-9. I don't think haven't seen enough. I know that's why.
Oh no, none of us have with
Yeah.
basketball. That's the
So
issue.
it's very difficult for me to say that. And quite frankly, to be completely honest, I don't know the ACC nearly well enough to say that, which is why if I say all league, then and you guys react that way, then maybe I'm really stepping out. But
there's just a lot of returning players, but also some good transfer portal guys that joined.
Fair enough. I think we will, and I think Notre Dame fans will get a full appreciation of Tay Davis. I think Tay Davis takes his game to the next level, is consistent. He had a very, very solid year last year. I think he takes that to the next level. I'm not sure I'm ready to say 11-9. I hope that that's true. If they are 11-9, I do think it's a good 11-9, and it causes the committee to have pause and give strong consideration to them. But I think you make a really good point about too many 3-point shots by Burton. That's an interesting,
such a good mid-range shooter. He's so good going to the hole. I just want him to keep doing it. But
yeah,
I get it.
He had four early turnovers last week, right off the bat in that Fort Wayne game, because he had the tendency to dribble in and then get himself in some trouble. So we need to see some development, I think, in that regard. And I would contend that even if this is a Notre Dame team that goes 10-10 in conference play, and I talked about it a good bit with our friend and colleague Tom Noy last week when we covered the game in Fort Wayne. He expects them to be a bubble team as well. He's been doing it about as long as anybody around here, not named Tim Priester. So I respect Tom's opinion. But I think at 10-10, they're still in the conversation as a bubble team, because if you're 10-10 in the ACC, the all new expanded ACC with more travel and more difficult games along the way, then you go into the conference tournament with a chance to win a game or two and be even more in the bubble conversation. So I think this team will be in the bubble conversation as long as its league record is 10-10 or better. And, based on the development, based on Marcus Shrewsbury's track record as a coach, and based on what I saw last week, this is a much more complete team that should not suffer a lot of blowout losses over the course of this 3 to 4 month season.
One little hidden aspect of this schedule is at the end of the year, I think it's the last 6 games, including the last 2, maybe the last 5 games, SMU, Stanford, and Cal all come to Notre Dame. It's huge Notre Dame doesn't go to SMU because that's probably a loss. And it's huge they don't get one of those junk losses at Stanford and Cal because you have to fly out there when you're exhausted from the season. So that's a little bit of a break that those teams have to come to.
I did notice that. Cal and Stanford come very close to each other, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's the last 2 games last I looked.
Yeah. Last thing I was Notre Dame basketball. I mean, I appreciate the shout out there, JB. I grew up in Notre Dame football stadium. I grew up in the Athletic and Convocation Center, as it was called. I started going. I saw Austin Carr play when the facility opened in 1968. And so when
they called it the Austin Carr Coliseum back then.
Exactly. So I love it when Notre Dame men's basketball. They're going to get better than they are this year, but it's going to be a big step up. All right, let's wrap it up. Our last question is from Run for Fun 1122. What will you be following closer Tuesday night? The presidential election, the first college football playoff, or if you're Tim O'Malley, something even more important?
Yes, 8th grade volleyball. I will get to see the game despite interviews because the election has pushed back the game from 6 to 7. So I will leave right after we're done at the Irish Athletics Complex, not to be confused with the old ACC. I still call it the ACC, and people have no idea what I'm talking about unless they grew up here, by the way, Priester, when I say that. I never transitioned to the JACC, and of course, that's gone as well. So girls volleyball, number 1, and we're going to have a podcast on Wednesday morning, so I'm going to watch on tape. The tape, I also call it tape instead of digital. It'll be digitized, actually. The college football playoff selections. If Notre Dame's 11, I'm going to be mad at my old VHS and throw it.
I want to say real quickly before I answer this that kudos to Tim Priester on his Braden Shrewsbury all-conference pick. It was such a bold pick that our fearless producer, Jack, got up and walked around his office. So I've been distracted this whole time watching Jack get up and walk around his office after Tim Priester predicted Braden Shrewsbury as all-conference. Tuesday night, I can unequivocally say that I will be paying the most attention to college football. There's Maction, baby. It's hard to beat live college football on Tuesday night, as well as the college football playoff reveal. I've got a radio spot tomorrow night in Atlanta, and they're not calling to talk to me about the election. So, plus, I don't think we're going to know the results of the election tomorrow night anyway, and I don't need to listen to a bunch of talking heads like myself. So, hopefully, we know something tomorrow night as a country. I'll keep my own opinions to myself.
What if
But
Gus
there we go.
Johnson were to announce the election part? Would that make you turn it off faster? Or if there was,
Say it again.
what if Gus Johnson were the announcer as one of the talking heads during the election? Would that be a
I would not be tuned in.
no? I thought Gus, as a segue, I think he comes in too hot, and then I think it gets okay. But Greg McElroy and Sean McDonough are my choice to listen to.
Those two guys are really, really good. They're
They're
really good.
SEC centric, but Tom Hart and Cole Kubelik are right up there with your tandem, TO. They're so good. And Kubelik played at Auburn at a really high level and really studies his craft. And then Tom Hart is called Major League Baseball. He's been a pro for years and years and years. So you're right. And we all make mistakes, but in the first quarter alone, Gus Johnson had Nick Singleton. Nick Singleton with a great run for Ohio State, and then I think butchered somebody else's name, and then it was very much Nick the Quick. And look, the enthusiasm is awesome, but it's hard to tell. I've heard this about some MLB announcers. It's hard to tell when it's a pop up or they're making a home run call.
Well, Tim, I'm curious about the outcome of the volleyball game, but I have to
I'll let
put
you
that
know. I'll
third.
text you
Okay, I
updates.
have to put that third. I've frequently called myself and summed up my career by just I'm a jock sports writer. That's essentially who I am. But this is a pretty big presidential election. That's going to be number one on my list. Obviously, I'm going to be monitoring the playoff committee, and like you, I will record it to make sure I don't miss anything. But this is a Super Bowl of politics.
Set your
tomorrow
VHS,
night.
Tim Priester. Set your VHS.
My
Rewind it.
VHS,
Yep,
yes,
yep,
I will
and we
set my
can watch the,
VHS. I hope I don't run out of tape to set that. But I'm going to have a real close eye on a presidential election because I am a little bit more than a jock sports writer, but not too much.
Look, trust me. I freaking love politics. I love history. The first out of town trip that Jessica and I ever took together was to Washington, D.C. at Christmas, and I had us tickets to Mount Vernon because I'm a big enough nerd to know that around Christmas time, it's the only time of the year that you can go and visit the third floor of George Washington's mansion. I got us tickets to see a Broadway rendition of Christmas Carol inside Ford's Theater. I love history. I love politics. It's just a toxic time right now, and I don't think tomorrow is going to provide clarity. I hope like hell I'm wrong.
We're going to wrap up there. Again, we are going to be back on Wednesday as JB, Tim, and I break down the results of the first college football playoff ranking. And then that doesn't preclude us from having one on Thursday when we get a little bit more into Florida State. Oh, joy.
yes.
Everybody wants to hear that.
Or Florida State.
Yeah, we'll do that. We're going to do that. So Wednesday, Thursday, big week here at Irish Illustrated. Thanks again for joining us. This has been Irish Illustrated Insider.